just told me, Abby, be strong. He doesn't deserve another chance, but I forgive you.
She got her freedom back, so why does this feel so unsettling? A woman stands alone in her living room. No stage, no crowd, no spotlight. Just a camera and her. The music starts. She begins to move, slow, controlled, almost hypnotic. Then sharper, faster, more intense. And in her hands, two knives. Not hidden, not subtle, fully visible. Millions of people have watched this exact moment. And somehow, the more you watch it, the less certain you feel about what you're seeing. Because it's not just the knives that make people uncomfortable. It's the way she stares into the camera, like she knows she's being watched. Like she's been watched for a very long time. There's no fear, no hesitation, just presence. And that's what makes it harder to explain. Is this confidence? Is this freedom? Or is this something else entirely? Something we don't have the language for? The internet can't agree. Some say she's finally reclaiming herself after years of control. Others say something about this doesn't feel right. Not obviously wrong, just off in a way that lingers. And maybe that's the most disturbing part. Because if something was clearly broken, it would be easier to understand. But this isn't clear. This is complicated, and it didn't start here. It didn't start with a video, or a caption, or a moment that went viral. It started years ago, long before anyone thought to question what they were seeing, back when the world believed they knew exactly who she was. The woman in those videos is Britney Spears, and there was a time when nothing about her felt uncertain. She wasn't just famous, she was everywhere. The face of an era, the sound of a generation. The kind of star that didn't just follow pop culture, she defined it. Every song dominated, every performance was dissected, every appearance became a moment. She was presented as effortless, flawless, almost untouchable. The perfect balance of innocence and allure, carefully crafted and endlessly repeated until it became reality in the eyes of the public. But perfection like that doesn't just happen. It's built, shaped, and maintained, often by forces the audience never sees. Even at her peak, there were subtle moments that didn't quite align, interviews that felt too controlled, smiles that held just a little too long, answers that sounded right but didn't feel entirely hers. She was always exactly what the world expected her to be, and that might have been the problem. Because when an image is that precise, that consistent, it leaves very little room for the person behind it. And the more perfect it looks, the more pressure it takes to keep it from breaking. For years, nobody questioned it. Why would they? Everything looked like success. But sometimes, the clearest stories are the ones that hide the most. And the version of Britney Spears the world fell in love with may have been only part of who she really was. But that's only part of the story. Long before the world started questioning those videos, before the breakdown, before the headlines turned darker, there were already cracks forming beneath the surface. They were small at first, easy to ignore, easy to explain away as part of fame. But they were there. Britney Spears didn't grow into fame gradually. She was launched into it at full speed. One moment, she was a teenager trying to find her place. The next, she was the center of global attention, with millions of eyes on her every move. And when that kind of attention comes that fast, it doesn't just elevate you, it traps you. Every interview became a performance. Every answer had to fit an image. And that image wasn't just about music, it was about who she was supposed to be. Young, desirable, but still innocent. Confident, but never too independent. And the line between those expectations was impossibly thin. You can see it in the interviews from that time. Questions that didn't feel appropriate. Conversations that pushed too far. She was asked about her body, her relationships, her private life, all while still trying to understand those things herself. And instead of protecting her from that pressure, the system around her leaned into it. Because controversy kept her relevant, and relevance kept the machine moving. Then came her relationship with Justin Timberlake. On the surface, it looked like a perfect match. Two of the biggest young stars in the world, building a narrative that fans could follow. But when it ended, everything shifted. The breakup didn't stay private. It became a storyline. And that storyline wasn't balanced. Britney was painted as the one who caused the damage, while Justin's image stayed largely intact. That framing mattered more than it seemed at the time, because it showed how quickly public perception could turn and how little control she actually had over it. From that point on, the tone around her began to change. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to notice if you were paying attention. The media became sharper, the coverage more invasive, the attention more aggressive. Paparazzi didn't just follow her, they surrounded her, waiting outside, chasing her car, documenting moments that should have been private. And over time, that constant pressure started to show. Not in one big moment, but in fragments. A look that lingered too long, a response that felt slightly off, a sense that something underneath the surface wasn't as stable as the image suggested. At the time, most people didn't think much of it. It was just part of celebrity culture, just another star dealing with fame. But looking back now, those early signs feel different because they weren't random. They were the beginning of a pattern, a slow build of pressure, expectation, and control that hadn't broken yet, but was getting closer with every passing moment. And then it finally broke. Not quietly, not behind closed doors, but in full view of the world. In 2007, everything changed. Britney Spears shaved her head. Cameras captured every second. The footage spread instantly, replayed across news channels, blogs, late-night shows. It wasn't treated as a human moment. It was turned into spectacle. Then came the umbrella incident. She struck a paparazzi's car while being surrounded, filmed from every angle. Again, it went viral. Again, it became entertainment. The narrative was immediate and unforgiving. She's lost control. She's unstable. She's spiraling. But almost no one stopped to ask what led her there. By that point, she wasn't just being followed, she was being hunted. Photographers waited outside her home, followed her every move, crowded her space, pushed for reactions. There was no privacy, no pause, no room to breathe. Every moment of stress became content. Every mistake became proof of a story the media had already decided to tell. At the same time, her personal life was collapsing under that pressure. Her custody battle intensified, and eventually she lost primary custody of her children. That moment hit harder than anything the public could see. But instead of empathy, it reinforced the narrative that she couldn't manage her own life. And once that idea took hold, everything shifted. Because when the world starts to believe someone can't take care of themselves, it becomes easier to justify taking control away from them. In 2008, that's exactly what happened. Britney Spears was placed under a conservatorship, a legal structure that gave her father control over her finances, her career, and many aspects of her personal decisions. It was presented as necessary, as protection, as a way to stabilize a situation that had gone too far. And at first, it seemed to work. The chaos faded, the headlines calmed down, the story looked like it had been fixed. But what most people didn't realize at the time was that this wasn't a temporary solution. It was the beginning of something much longer, much more controlled, and much more complicated than anyone expected. At first, the conservatorship looked like control in the name of protection. The chaos disappeared, the headlines softened, and slowly Britney Spears returned to the spotlight. New music, public appearances, a full Las Vegas residency that ran for years, selling out night after night. On the surface, it felt like a comeback story, structured, successful, stable. But the deeper you look, the harder it is to ignore the contradiction at the center of it all. Because while she was performing at a high level, memorizing choreography, rehearsing for hours, generating millions in revenue, she reportedly wasn't allowed to make basic decisions about her own life. According to court records and later statements, many aspects of her finances, medical care, and personal choices were controlled under the conservatorship. And that creates a question that doesn't have an easy answer. If she was capable enough to handle the pressure of performing in front of thousands night after night under intense scrutiny, why wasn't she considered capable enough to decide how she lived her own life? That question didn't explode all at once. It built slowly, piece by piece. Fans began noticing patterns, interviews became rare, public statements felt limited. Her social media presence, when it existed, didn't always feel like a direct reflection of her voice. Some believed it was managed, others weren't sure, but the uncertainty kept growing. And then something shifted. The fans who had followed her for years started asking louder questions, not just about her career, but about her autonomy. That's where the hashtag Free Britney movement began. At first, it was dismissed, labeled as conspiracy, overreaction, internet noise. But as time passed, more information surfaced. Legal filings, testimonies, and eventually Britney's own words began to paint a more complicated picture. In court, she described feeling controlled, monitored, and restricted in ways that went far beyond what many people assumed. Still, it's important to stay grounded. Not every claim surrounding the conservatorship has been fully verified, and perspectives remain divided. Some argue it protected her during a critical period. Others believe it extended far beyond its original purpose. But regardless of where the full truth lies, one thing became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about a pop star navigating fame anymore. It was about a system that had the power to define her life for over a decade. And once people started to see that system clearly, they couldn't unsee it. In 2021, after years of pressure building both inside and outside the courtroom, the conservatorship finally ended. Britney Spears was legally free. No more oversight controlling her daily decisions, no more structure defining what she could or couldn't do. For many watching, this was supposed to be the moment everything made sense again. The resolution, the release, the long-awaited happy ending. But almost immediately, that expectation started to fall apart. Instead of stepping away quietly to rebuild her life in private, Britney became more visible, especially online. Her Instagram filled with videos. Same room, same camera angle, dancing again and again. The movements weren't polished like before. They were raw, repetitive, almost hypnotic. Her gaze felt intense, direct, sometimes difficult to read. And then there were the captions. Fragmented thoughts, emotional bursts, messages that didn't always follow a clear structure. Some people saw honesty in that. Others saw confusion. And then came the video that pushed everything further into uncertainty. She danced while holding knives. Britney later said they were props, not real, and there is no confirmed evidence suggesting otherwise. But by then, the reaction had already taken shape. The conversation split instantly. One side saw a woman reclaiming control over her body, her image, her space. After years of restriction, this was her expression, unfiltered and unapologetic. The other side felt something else entirely. Not fear exactly, but discomfort. A sense that something didn't fully align, not because of what she was doing, but because of how it felt watching it. And that feeling became the story. Because this wasn't what people expected freedom to look like. It wasn't clean, it wasn't clear, it wasn't easy to interpret. And maybe that's where the real tension comes from. Because for so long, Britney's story had been controlled, explained, and packaged for the public. Now it wasn't. Now she was showing exactly what she wanted to show. And instead of answers, it created more questions. Was this healing in progress? Was this the natural result of years of pressure finally releasing? Or were there still things happening beneath the surface that no one could see? The truth is, no one outside her world could answer that with certainty. And that uncertainty made everything feel more intense. Because for the first time in a long time, Britney Spears wasn't being defined by a system. She was defining herself. And the result didn't come with a clear explanation. This is where everything becomes harder to pin down and a lot easier to misinterpret. Because what people see now depends almost entirely on how they choose to see it. Take the knife video. Britney Spears dances in her living room, holding two knives, moving with confidence, no hesitation. Later, she explains they were props, not real, and there is no confirmed evidence suggesting otherwise. But the reaction wasn't really about whether the knives were dangerous. It was about how it felt to watch it. Some people saw control, a woman fully aware of herself, reclaiming her image in a way that refuses to be softened or explained. Others saw something else, something harder to define, a kind of unease that doesn't come from what's happening, but from what might be happening underneath. And that split doesn't stop there. Across her videos, viewers have pointed out small details: the intensity in her eyes, the repetition in her movements, the tone of her captions, sometimes emotional, sometimes fragmented. Some online discussions have gone further, suggesting physical concerns or signs of distress. But it's important to be clear, there is no verified evidence confirming those claims, and much of what circulates comes from interpretation, not fact. Then there's the idea that even after the conservatorship ended, she might still be isolated in some way. Some sources and fans have questions whether she has the right support system around her. Others argue the opposite, that this is simply what independence looks like after years of control: messy, unfiltered, and not designed to make anyone else comfortable. And at the center of all of this is the question people keep coming back to: her mental state. Is she struggling? Is she healing? Or is she finally being herself without the pressure to perform a version of normal that the world expects? There is no current, publicly confirmed diagnosis that answers that question, and anything beyond what she has personally shared remains speculation. Which makes this situation different from most public narratives. There's no clear label, no agreed conclusion, just perspectives, interpretations, and a constant stream of reactions. And that leads to the most uncomfortable possibility of all. Maybe what we're seeing isn't something broken, and it isn't something fully resolved either. Maybe it's something in between. A person who went through years of control, now navigating complete freedom, without a script, without a filter, and without the need to make sense to anyone watching. And if that's the case, then the real discomfort might not be about her at all. It might come from the fact that we don't know how to watch her anymore. When you step back and look at the full story, Britney Spears doesn't fit into a simple explanation. Not a clean comeback, not a clear breakdown, not a story with a neat ending. She's been shaped by fame at a level most people will never experience, controlled by a system that lasted over a decade, and then suddenly released into complete independence in front of the same audience that watched her fall apart. And now, for the first time in a long time, there's no one clearly defining what her story's supposed to be. No structure, no narrative, no version that's been polished for public consumption. Just her. And maybe that's why it feels so difficult to understand. Because for years, the world was told how to see Britney Spears. When she was rising, when she was falling, and even when she was being controlled. Every phase came with an explanation. But now, there isn't one. What we're seeing today isn't just a moment, it's the result of everything that came before. The pressure, the scrutiny, the loss of control, and the sudden return of it. And maybe what feels unsettling isn't her behavior, but the absence of a clear story to attach to it. Some people see healing, others see warning signs, and both perspectives say something, not just about her, but about us, about how we process fame, control, and vulnerability when it's happening in real time. Because the truth is, we may never fully understand what's really happening behind the camera. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the real question isn't what's wrong with Britney Spears, but whether we ever truly understood her in the first place. And if we didn't then, what makes us think we do now? If you want more stories that go deeper than what's on the surface, stories that don't just tell you what happened, but make you question what you're seeing, make sure to subscribe and stay with us for the next story.